Let me tell you how to move a mountain. God's too hard for you to climb. Let me tell you how to move a mountain. One that hides the bright sun's shine. When your hands are bleeding and torn, and your feet are weary and worn. When you want to climb up, but the rocks and move mountain, move mountain. Mountain, get out of my way. Let me tell you how to move a mountain. When the climbing gets you down, let me tell you how to move a mountain. You've traveled your last round, when your friends have left you behind, and your way you cannot just find. When your prayer is for help, but you stand up, move mountain, mountain, get out of my way. If you have faith the size of a mustard seed, just say move mountain, move mountain, move mountain. Mountain, get out of my way. If you have faith the size of a mustard seed, just say move mountain, move mountain, move mountain, move. Get out of my way.
You may have moved mountains to be here this morning, or you may have just rolled out of bed and sat down in front of your computer. Whatever it took, we are glad you are here. Let there be joy in our coming together this morning. Let there be truth in the words we speak and the songs we sing. Let there be help and healing for our disharmony or despair. Let there be silence for the voice within and beyond us. Let there be joy in the spark that kindles our chalice flame. And kindling that flame this morning, symbol of our free faith, are Eleanor and Rob Keithan.
We light our chalice today for the power of love and the beauty of spring.
Set to the widely known tune, Ode to Joy, Our opening hymn addresses the miraculous power of joy and its accompanying sense of the possibility of heaven on earth, Elysium. Let us, for just a few moments this morning, put aside our present cares and woes to imagine the unity and joy that we can behold from the window of nature's holy temple, nature's holy fane. Please stay muted and join us in the singing of hymn number 327, Joy Thou Goddess.
Joy, thou goddess, very immortal, offspring of Elysium, led with rapture to the portal of thy holy fane we come. Fashion's laws indeed may sever, but thy magic joins again. Humankind is one forever, neath thy mild and gentle reign. Joy in nature's wide dominion, mightiest cause of all is found, and 'tis joy that moves opinion when the wheel of time goes round. From the bud she moves a flower, suns from out their orbs of light. Distant spheres obey her power, far beyond all mortal sight.
Good morning, friends. Welcome to All Souls Church. My name is Danielle Garrett. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'll be your worship associate today. I'm greeting you this morning from Nashville, Tennessee, where I moved last summer to begin studies at Vanderbilt Divinity School. All Souls is an incredibly special community to me. It's here that I felt my own call to ministry and have found tremendous support and inspiration and love from this community as I prepare to pursue this path. So I'm delighted to be greeting you this morning. In an effort to acknowledge and support Indigenous communities, it's important to recognize the land on which our church stands. The closest tribe was Nacotchtank, from which the name Anacostia is derived. They were part of the Piscataway group of tribes. We acknowledge that Indigenous peoples were here before us, are here with us now, and will continue to be with us as we look forward to the future. Let's take a moment of silence to reflect on whose land we each reside in our individual and collective locations around the US and our planet Earth. Now, if you were together in the building, this is the time where we would turn and greet one another. But while we're still online, we do something called beholding. So I invite you to take a minute to scroll through the gallery view, say hello in the chat to each other, and behold one another's faces as together we create community.
Good morning, All Souls. I am Reverend Rob Keithan. My pronouns are he, him, and I have the pleasure of serving as your Minister of Social Justice. All Souls continues to provide not only worship services, but programs and other events that may be of interest to you. After today's service, you are invited to stay for coffee and conversation, or to attend an after-hour conversation with Reverend Kathleen and the transitions team. The topic for our conversation is the interim time. It's not a holding pattern. The Zoom link can be found on the website and in the chat. That's from 11:45 to 12:30. Next Sunday's after-hour conversation will be governance as a spiritual practice, and will include a review of our governance system and conversation about why good governance is also a spiritual discipline and practice. Also 11:45 to 12:30. Our monthly Vesper service will be held this Wednesday evening, April 14th at 7:30 p.m. Vespers is a simple service of poetry, chants, and a time for silence and reflection. The Zoom information can be found on the church's website. And finally, the adult spiritual development team is offering a 1-hour dive into poetry as a sacred text from 7:30 to 8:30 p.m. on Wednesday, April 21st. All are welcome to attend. The Zoom link can be found on the website. We turn now to our pastoral concerns. First, a communal prayer for justice as the trial of Derek Chauvin continues, and our nation continues to wrestle with racism and sexism, transphobia, and xenophobia. We pray for healing and for equity, especially for Black, Brown, Indigenous, Asian Pacific Islander, and other people of color. At All Souls, the memorial service for Emily Dyer will be held on April 24th at 6 p.m. Zoom information to follow. And we heard good news from member Jose Luis Sanchez, who tells us that he's feeling stronger than he was in January. And Jose writes, "Please thank All Souls friends on my behalf for the many expressions of concern and support. I look forward to functional recovery in order to reciprocate." In the silence that follows, please say aloud the names of those you carry on your heart this morning. Now, tomorrow, Monday, April 12th, begins the holy month of Ramadan. One of the defining features of the Muslim faith, and one that we have much to learn from, I think, is that it is highly embodied. Practices like bowing in prayer, making the pilgrimage to Mecca, and fasting during Ramadan are physical reminders of the Muslim commitment made to the Ummah, to the community, and to people in need. In the guidance they put out to the American Muslim community, nearly every page of their practical safety tips has a footer that reads, "The National Muslim COVID-19 Task Force, the National Black Muslim COVID Coalition, pray that Allah continue to protect our communities, healthcare and frontline workers, and vulnerable populations from this pandemic, and accepts our fasts, du'as, and prayers during this blessed month of Ramadan." So together, or today, let us join together in a prayer of solidarity. Dear God that is known by many names, Spirit of love and liberation, remind us that we are connected in community across time and geography and distance. Remind us that we are all members of one human family. And dear God, remind us of our obligations to ourselves and to each other. For those of us in need, remind us that it's okay to ask for help. For those of us who have energy to give, remind us of our spiritual and ethical obligation to care for each other. Let us join with our Muslim colleagues in calling for the protection of healthcare and frontline workers and vulnerable populations from this pandemic. And as the vaccine becomes more widely available here in the United States, remind us that we must advocate for that vaccine to be available in other countries as well. We should not and must not allow our response to the virus to deepen global inequality. Instead, dear God, help us to be collaborative and creative and courageous together. Help us rise to the challenges of our time with greater insight and greater resolve. And may we, through our hearts and our actions, transform ourselves and our world. Amen.
Our reading this morning is a poem by Alana Bell titled Miracle. What else to call the way the bare branches I'd bought at the neighborhood bodega came back to life that winter? I'd carried them home, dry, wrapped in paper, stuck them in the square vase, and as an afterthought, filled it with water. I don't know when I noticed the pale pink shoots sprouting from the submerged ends. Wild reaching roots, like ginseng, are the hair on an old woman's chin. Then tiny green leaves begin to appear at the tips, curling over themselves with the sheer effort of growing. I'd thought they were dead. And now I recall being in the choke of a fog I did not have a name for and didn't think I'd survive. I could try to describe it for you now. The nights I woke with my pulse pounding through, the heaviness of each breath, how the effort of being inside my body felt like burning. But what I really want to tell you is this: how in the parch of that long drought, the people I loved kept bringing me water. Water, though I turned my back and did not answer to my name, though I flung the cup away. Let me say it plain, I wanted to die. But something in me, some tiny bulb, still alive under all that rotted wood, kept drinking, kept right on drinking.
The last thing I remember asking my surgeon before the anesthesia was administered was, "Do you still think this is a medical necessity?" And she laughed and she said, "Wait until you open your eyes." And then everything went dark. Perhaps I'd better explain. For years, I suspected that I wasn't seeing as clearly as I could. And I chalked it up to the natural aging process until an optometrist suggested I take a visual field test. It's like playing a video game. They give you a clicker, and every time you see a dot of light, you hit a button. And after the test was over, the ophthalmologist came in smiling. I said, "I must have passed the test." And she said, "No, quite the opposite. You flunked the test with flying colors. Your eyelids are occluding your peripheral vision." Well, I asked, "So what can be done about it?" She said, "Surgery, an eyelid lift." I said, No. That's for older people. I'm not that vain." And she said, "Well, suit yourself, but you'll be amazed at how much more of the world you're going to be able to see." The theme for this month is miracles, which when we chose it way back last year, I wasn't sure how I felt about it. There were no vaccines on the horizon, only escalating numbers of people getting sick and dying. We had heard that it took years, not months, to identify an effective vaccine, to test it, to ensure its safety, and then at least a couple of years to manufacture it and distribute it. So we all hunkered down, and some of us wished for a miracle cure from God, and others put their faith in science and prayed for an intervention. Because that's what miracles are, an intervention. And to be honest, it's not a topic Unitarian Universalists tend to explore much, because historically we've rejected the idea of miracles as they are commonly and popularly known. Here's a fairly standard definition. A miracle is an event that seems inexplicable by natural or scientific laws. In various religions, a phenomenon that is characterized as miraculous is often attributed to the actions of a supernatural being, magic, a miracle worker, a saint, or a religious leader. Our religious ancestors rejected this idea outright. Thomas Jefferson's now famous Jefferson Bible, he took a razor to the Christian scriptures, cutting out all references to anything supernatural, such as angels, deities, supreme beings, and yes, miracles. He edited out the miracles because they conflicted with his rational understanding of religion. And then later, the transcendentalist Ralph Waldo Emerson affirmed this instinct when he said, "I can believe a miracle because I can raise my own arm. I can believe a miracle because I can remember. I can believe it because I can be understood by you." So Emerson's belief about miracles influenced contemporary Unitarian Universalist approach to miracles today. He said the invariable mark of wisdom is to see the miraculous in the common. like to imagine that if Emerson were able to attend a concert today by the UU singer-songwriter Peter Mayer, he might be nodding his head in agreement with Mayer's signature song, Holy Now. Listen to this excerpt from that music. He says, "When I was in Sunday school, we would learn about the time that Moses split the sea in two and Jesus made the water wine. And I remember feeling sad that miracles don't happen still. But now I can't keep track because everything's a miracle. Everything's a miracle. Wine from water, it's not so small, but an even better magic trick is that anything is here at all. So the challenging thing becomes not to look for miracles, but finding where there isn't one." Mayer's song, Holy Now, continues to give me chills every time I hear it because it encapsulates a feeling that I suspect many of us have, that so much of what we take for granted could be experienced as a miracle, but too often our state of mind prevents us from perceiving it as such. We spend a lot of time regretting the past, anxious about the future, and bored with the present. And because of that, it is difficult to acknowledge the, miraculous beauty that lay before us. If we did, I suspect it would feel like Moses standing before that burning bush, averting his eyes because of all the light he could not bear to see. I was in the recovery room and I heard a murmur of voices. And a voice came to me out of the darkness that said, "On the count of 3, I want you to open your eyes. 1, 2, 3. I opened my eyes and I gasped out loud. Seeing is a metaphor that is used to describe a kind of knowing. We say things like we have deeper insight, or we sing, "I once was lost and now I'm found, was blind and now I see." And I want to acknowledge, before I go much further with this metaphor, that there are those who are blind who have other ways of experiencing the world, which is just as powerful and meaningful as this metaphor of this, as the cited. But the metaphor of going from a state of not seeing clearly to deeper perception is an important spiritual truth. And I think that was part of why I gasped. Because although there was no divine intervention other than the skilled hand of a surgeon who had likely performed this procedure hundreds, if not thousands of times, it was astonishing to me how much I could see. It was as if I had been walking around with curtains shuttering half my vision, and those curtains were flung open and I could really see. Everything out there was so bright, so clear, so much more than I imagined was out there. And it was at first overwhelming. I had just experienced a miracle of modern science. And just for a moment, it was one I wasn't sure I wanted. Because when you can see more, more is required of you. All of us who have traveled together on the journey towards wholeness, our anti-racist, anti-oppressive journey towards wholeness, know this to be true. And it has to be especially true for white people. With greater insight, you must accept greater responsibility. And part of the process of becoming woke, of waking up to the realities that we had previously ignored, is to change that awareness into alertness, alertness to when you can accept a different kind of responsibility for being a white anti-racist activist. So what if the gift of this insight enables us to manifest a different kind of miracle, a capacity for awe and wonder and wisdom while doing this anti-oppressive work together, not out of duty, but out of that sense of awe and wonder and love? What if the outcome of this miraculous awareness might be that people of color didn't have to do most of the heavy lifting anymore? Usually, in our everyday lives, the miracle you don't want is that intervention that changes you, that forces you to see things about yourself, about the institutions we serve, and the world in which we live, which means we cannot go back to experiencing the world in the same way as before. The miracle we don't want is the experiences that challenge us to live in the world as it truly is, as we understand it anew, and as we understand it, how it could be different. In last Sunday's Easter sermon, titled Threatened by Resurrection, I made a claim that alarmed some of you, that the church, as you have always known it, is dead. The metaphor was a prediction about the familiar ways that we have thought about how we do church together being challenged by the new realities on the other side of the pandemic. But when I found Elena Bell's poem, Miracles, that we heard earlier today, I realized that there was something more to say about this metaphor of the church being dead. It's dead like those bare branches she bought at her neighborhood bodega and brought back home, skeptical that they might ever come back to life. You remember that Elena then recounts in the poem a time in her life of great drought. She said, I could try to describe it for you now. The nights I woke with my pulse pounding through the heaviness of each breath, how the effort of being inside my body felt like burning. But what I really want to tell you is this: how in the parch of that long drought, the people I loved kept bringing me water. All year long, during a time when the church home we love has been closed, we have understood that the things that are most important about this church and this faith have been kept alive by the way we have kept bringing water to one another. The fact that All Souls has not only survived but thrived this past year is, by my estimation, nothing less than a miracle. But it didn't take divine intervention. It took loving attention to watering branches that at times looked dry and dead. It took you. So let's go back to that definition of a miracle for a moment. Remember, it said, in various religions, a phenomenon that is characterized as miraculous is often attributed to the actions of a supernatural being, magic, a miracle worker, a saint, or a religious leader. In this faith tradition, unlike some others, we say that we all have to be religious leaders. In other words, we are all the miracle workers. But we first have to see the opportunity for miracles that can happen once we really open our eyes to the possibilities. All right, I'm going to get real with you now. Let's talk for a minute about the nitty-gritty of a miracle that we don't want in the life of our church. In this week's e-newsletter column, Executive Director Tracy Hughes Trotter wrote about the fact that we have people living on the front portico of the church. Last December, one of those persons died with his head resting on the threshold of the door to the sanctuary. One man has pitched his tent on the church property. Now, I want to acknowledge this is not new news for All Souls. Several years ago, you made the decision to remove the fence that would have prevented these unhoused persons from staying at the church. But what may be new is the number, the persistence, and the frequency of persons who consider All Souls their home. Your executive and ministry team and facility staff have all been struggling with what's the right thing to do, especially as we move towards reopening this fall. We know that calling the police is a morally unacceptable option. And we have a feeling that there is a better way, a more humane way, one that is consistent with our values and that truly honors and recognizes human worth and dignity. I have to be honest with you. My first reaction is simply, I don't want to deal with this. There's so much else I have to deal with. But there's this other part, this God part, this spirit part that keeps tugging at me as well and saying, maybe there's a blessing in disguise here that we haven't yet uncovered in this thing you don't want. Tracy's thoughtful essay moved me to think perhaps there is something we as a congregation can do collectively together. And that's why we've issued the invitation to hear from you, to see if there's something we can do. We'd have to be able to do it together. There are no miracle workers on your staff that can make something happen to engage with this challenge without you. But religious leaders in community have been known to bring about miracles all the time. So we hope to hear from you by April 30th to determine whether or not this is a ministry to which members of this congregation feel called to serve. I think back to what Peter Mayer sang when he says the challenging thing becomes not to look for miracles, but finding where there isn't one. And I would add, finding out that the miracle you think you want sometimes isn't the one you need. Yes, I can hear the Rolling Stones song right now. The miracle I needed the most in my life was one that others had to coax out of me like a new leaf from a dead stick with their persistent watering. It was a miracle of the shift in insight, a change from walking around with blinders on to seeing the world more fully. When we begin to experience this miracle together, we find we have the ability to move more skillfully, more deliberately, and more assertively into fully embracing, living into beloved community together. Now that is a miracle of human endeavor I think we all need. May it be so.
bit more sacrifice. 1, 2, 3, 4. Faith, faith, faith. Mustard seed, faith. Got to have it. Really need it. Mustard seed. Get your Pfizer or your Moderna or your J&J. Do it for everyone. Listen to the science. Keep those masks on. Help your neighbor. Show you've got yours.
Good morning. I'm Anna Hargrave. As a lifelong member of All Souls, I've served on quite a few volunteer committees and projects. At the moment, I have the pleasure of serving on the steering committee of the Beckner Advancement Fund. Each year, this fund makes grants to jumpstart projects within the church and provide support to organizations working to dismantle systemic oppression and facilitate economic opportunity, justice, and liberation throughout Washington, D.C. I bet half of you are thinking, we have a volunteer committee that gives out money? The answer is yes, and it's just as much fun as it sounds. But I'm guessing some of you are asking, well, hold on. If the church has all this money, why do you keep bothering us about making a pledge? That's because the founders, Earl and Meta Beckner, specified that the fund could not support general operating expenses. They understood that no matter how generous or well-intentioned, no single donor can create a diverse, spirit-growing, justice-seeking community like All Souls. It takes all of us making a commitment of time, talent, and treasure to sustain this work. During my tenure on the committee, we've been on a journey to think about not just how to honor the Beckner's wishes, but how do we convert these dollars into meaningful action? What does it mean to pursue justice in ways that truly center communities? And what does this moment in time demand of us? I realize All Souls has been asking me these questions my whole life. I can't think of another institution that so lovingly comforts us in times of difficulty while also challenging us to continuously grow and become the best versions of ourselves. When I make my annual pledge, I see it as both a thank you and an investment to ensure that this vibrant community can continue to support and inspire all of us in the coming year. We so appreciate everyone who gives when we pass the virtual collection plate. But as you think about what this community has meant to you over the last year and your hopes for the next, I encourage you to make that next step, take that next step by making a pledge.
Be thou my vision, O God of my heart, not me all else to be save that thou art. Thou my best thought by day or by night. sleeping, thy presence my light. Be thou my wisdom, and thou my true word. I ever with thee, and thou with me, God. Thou my soul shelter, thou my high tower. Praise thou me heavenward, O power of my power. Riches I need not, nor world's empty praise. Thou my inheritance now and always. Thou and thou only first in my heart. Sovereign of heaven, my treasure thou art.
We leave this gathered community now, but we don't leave our connection, our concerns, or our care for each other. Our service to each other, to our world, and to our faith continues until we are together again, friends. Be strong, be true, be well, be loving, and of course, always expect a miracle. Go in peace.